I'm Charlie Taylor, and welcome to Chapter 5 on telephone wiretapping. Unlike other chapters in this video, I need to change the structure a little bit from the pure informational video format to a teaching format. For without doing so, I'd be doing an injustice to you, since professional wiretappers use techniques that go far beyond those used by the amateurs. And without the basic knowledge I'm about to impart to you, it will be difficult for you to understand the subject of wiretapping. Let me start by giving you a basic understanding of how the standard telephone works, and I'll use your home phone as an example. I promise you this won't take long. Your telephone is connected to the telephone company's central office via a pair of wires. The wire pair is specifically manufactured to a strict set of parameters so as to control the resistance, the capacitance, and the inductance of the cable pair. While your telephone line consists of these two wires, which are actually twisted together and bundled into larger cables, most of my examples in this chapter will illustrate the two wires as untwisted. The telephone line is actually an open circuit, with battery being applied at the central office. When you pick up your phone, the circuit closes. Current then begins to flow, and the central office gives you a dial tone. How much current flows depends on the applied voltage and the length of the distance of wires, or the distance you are from the central office. The telephone company's battery power to your line is shared with hundreds if not thousands of other telephone lines, and therefore the voltage will have a constant fluctuation as other telephone users go on and off hook, as you can see on my meter. The measurement you're looking at now is with the phone on hook. Notice the constant fluctuation. Now, let me take the phone off hook. Notice it also has a constant fluctuation. And since voltage fluctuates, so does current. And current is what is used to power many wiretaps. Just trust me that it's true, and you will understand why there are no magic wiretap detectors like you see advertised at the spy shops or on the internet that reliably work. As a matter of fact, I could easily tap your line and defeat 100% of those devices. All wiretaps fall into three basic categories: series, parallel, and inductive. A series wiretap is as the name implies, and that it is connected in series to one side of your telephone line. These wiretaps can be directly connected to a tape recorder, but most commonly use a radio transmitter to send the telephone conversations to a radio receiver a few hundred feet away. Of all the wiretaps, these are the easiest to detect and are the type of wiretaps that are frequently used in divorce cases and are popular with many of the less scrupulous private investigators. However, most of them will install them inside the telephone network box, which is attached to the side of your home. When I say that they're the easiest to detect, that's only if the TSCM service provider understands the basics of the telephone system and what specific test measurements need to be performed and where they need to be performed. If you ever hire a TSCM service provider and he comes to your house and checks your lines without checking several other neighbors' lines, then you've probably wasted your money by having a very unknowledgeable TSCM technician. Actually, the telephone company finds the series type of wiretap pretty easily and frequently does, however, mostly by accident. The reason the series wiretap is so easy to detect is that it puts a significant amount of additional resistance to your telephone line cable. And the added resistance significantly decreases the amount of current flowing on your telephone line. The second type of wiretap is a parallel wiretap, which is connected to both sides of your telephone line, as you can see in the illustration. There are several different types of parallel wiretaps, and I want to spend a few minutes on this type of tap. The most common of these is sold right at your neighborhood Radio Shack as a device for recording your own telephone conversations. This type of device is what's also called a high impedance parallel wiretap because it draws so little current and voltage from the telephone line that even the most sensitive digital meters won't see it. To demonstrate this, I'm going to connect and disconnect this Radio Shack high impedance parallel wiretap. As I do so, watch the meter readings on your screen. Okay, this is with the device not connected. Now I'm connecting the Radio Shack parallel wiretap. Now I'm disconnected it. As you can see, there's no meaningful change in the line voltage. Let's do the same thing with the phone off hook. Now it's disconnected. Now it's connected. Now it's disconnected. Again, as you can see, there's just no meaningful change in the line voltage. That doesn't mean that this type of wiretap is not detectable, because it is. It just takes a little work, a lot of knowledge, and the right tools. But I can assure you that there is no magic black box that you can connect to your telephone line to detect it. I keep repeating this because there's so many wiretap detection boxes sold to unknowledgeable victims. Why the government doesn't go after some of these guys for fraud is really beyond me. Many sellers of wiretapping devices will also make this type of wiretap coupled with a radio transmitter. If it's a high impedance parallel wiretap, it will use a separate battery to power the radio transmitter. If it draws its power from the telephone line's power, then it's frequently referred to as a low impedance parallel wiretap. Low impedance devices drain enough power from the telephone line to become very easy to electronically detect. And some low impedance parallel wiretaps can be easily detected by the telephone company and are not very popular devices with the professional eavesdroppers for the obvious reasons. Another spin on the high impedance parallel wiretap is when a device referred to as a slave is used. The slave unit is connected to the telephone wiretap and then to a separate independent telephone line, which allows the wiretapper to literally dial up the telephone tap from a remote location. Again, there's just so many variations of this type of wiretap, and I only want you to understand the basics for right now. By the way, this type of wiretap is frequently used by law enforcement. When the government presents a court-ordered wiretap to the telephone company, they'll typically show the law enforcement officials where to attach the wiretap and provide a working telephone line for the slave unit. Typically, the phone company will not make the actual wiretap connections for them. Slave type of wiretaps are extremely easy to make and are ideal for long-term eavesdropping operations. However, they present a great deal of risk for the professional wiretapper because if the device is ever accidentally found, it becomes relatively easy for the phone company to trace the history of the external independent line. I know that if I were a bad guy, it would be the last type of tap I would use because of the risk of being caught. In my opinion, there's just too many other ways to tap lines that virtually eliminate the risk of detection by the phone company or by most TSCM experts. Let me turn your attention away from wiretaps for a second to better explain why many wiretaps are so difficult to find.